She brought justice to a lawless town, but nothing could prepare her for the moment she looked into the eyes of the outlaw who just rode in and realized it was her husband, the one she buried in her heart years ago. Keep watching to see how this love story turned into the deadliest standoff the West has ever seen. The sun beat down on dusty Redemption Gulch, but Sheriff Clara Boone didn't flinch. Her eyes, the color of faded denim, scanned the bustling street. A stray dog yipped, children laughed, and the blacksmith's hammer rang out a steady rhythm. Clara knew every face in town, every worry line, and every hopeful smile. She was more than just a sheriff, she was Redemption Gulch's protector. Today was the annual pie contest. Tables laden with apple, cherry, and pecan pies lined Main Street. The aroma filled the air, making Clara's stomach rumble. Old Mrs. Gable, known for her prize-winning apple pie, winked at Clara. "Sheriff, you gonna judge fair now, you hear." Clara chuckled, her hand resting on the worn handle of her rifle. "Always, Mrs. Gable, always." Later, a young boy, little Billy, tripped and scraped his knee. Tears welled in his eyes. Clara knelt, her tough exterior softening. She pulled out a clean handkerchief and gently wiped away the dirt. "There you go, Billy, all better." She even produced a shiny silver dollar from her pocket for a soda pop. Billy's face lit up and he ran off, shouting his thanks. This was Clara's Redemption Gulch, a town worth fighting for, a town worth protecting. She felt a deep sense of peace and purpose, unaware that the shadows of her past were about to descend, threatening to shatter everything she held dear. That night, after the pie contest ribbons were awarded and the town quieted, Clara sat on her porch. The only light came from the moon and the faint glow of her lamp inside. She held a small, worn photograph. It showed a young Clara beaming next to a handsome soldier in uniform. His name was Jake. A wave of sadness washed over her. Jake had been her everything. They'd grown up together, dreaming of a life on a ranch. But the war had taken him, or so she believed. The telegram had arrived with the dreaded news. Private Jacob Miller killed in action. Clara had mourned him deeply, burying her dreams alongside his memory. She traced Jake's face in the photo, her fingers lingering on his smile. A smile she hadn't seen in years, a smile that now felt like a cruel trick of the past. Sometimes, late at night, she still imagined what their life would have been like. Children, a cozy home, and Jake by her side. Clara sighed, placing the photo back in its hiding place beneath the floorboards. The war had changed everything. It had hardened her, forcing her to become the strong, independent woman she was today. But it had also left a hole in her heart, a hole that even the love of Redemption Gulch couldn't quite fill. Little did she know, that hole was about to be ripped open in the most unimaginable way. The next morning, a cloud of dust billowed on the horizon. A lone rider, his face grim, galloped into Redemption Gulch. He reined in his horse in front of Clara's office, panting. "Sheriff Boone, stagecoach, robbed." Clara's eyes narrowed. "The Black Creek stage, what happened?" "The Rattlers," the rider gasped. "They took everything, money, valuables, scared the passengers half to death." Clara immediately gathered a posse. They rode out to the scene of the robbery, finding the stagecoach overturned and abandoned. The passengers were gone, presumably having walked to the nearest town. Clara examined the ground, her keen eyes searching for clues. She found a distinctive snake-shaped belt buckle made of silver. It looked expensive, custom-made. And there was something else, a small, intricately carved wooden bird lying near a broken strongbox. Clara picked it up, turning it over in her hand. It was familiar, too familiar. "Anything, Sheriff?" asked Deputy Johnson. Clara's voice was low. "They're getting bolder, and they're leaving clues, careless clues." She didn't mention the wooden bird. That was a secret, a piece of her past that was starting to unravel. The Rattlers were more than just bandits. They were a growing threat, and Clara knew with a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning. The peace of Redemption Gulch was about to be shattered. The Rattlers grew bolder. They raided Farmer McGregor's cattle, leaving him penniless. They ransacked the general store, taking supplies and terrorizing Mrs. Higgins. Fear gripped Redemption Gulch. People whispered about leaving, about abandoning their homes. Clara worked tirelessly, patrolling the town, organizing a night watch. She tried to reassure the frightened citizens, but even her strong voice couldn't completely dispel the growing panic. The wooden bird lay hidden in her desk drawer, a constant reminder of her past and the unsettling feeling that she knew who was behind these attacks. One evening, a group of townsfolk gathered in the saloon, their faces etched with worry. "Sheriff, what are we going to do?" asked a trembling Mr. Abernathy. "They'll be back, they always come back." Clara stood tall, her eyes blazing with determination. "We're going to fight," she declared. "This is our town, our home. We won't let those rattlers scare us away. We'll stand together and we'll protect what's ours." She began to organize the town's defenses, teaching people how to shoot, setting up barricades, and planning escape routes. But in the quiet moments, when the town was asleep, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that she was fighting a ghost, a shadow from her past that had returned to haunt her. The thought of confronting the rattlers and potentially the man she once loved filled her with dread. The day dawned with an ominous silence. The wind had died down and the air was thick with a strange stillness. Clara stood on the roof of the saloon, scanning the horizon with her rifle. She felt it in her gut, today was the day. Suddenly, a rider appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the rising sun. He raised his hand, and a wave of men emerged from the canyons surrounding Redemption Gulch. The rattlers had arrived. Clara recognized the snake-shaped belt buckles, the rough faces, the glint of steel. But her eyes were drawn to the leader, a tall figure on a black horse, his face partially hidden by a bandana. He raised his hand again, and the rattlers began to advance. Clara took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to protect her town, no matter the cost. She raised her rifle, aiming at the leader. As he rode closer, a gust of wind blew the bandana away from his face. Clara gasped, her rifle falling from her hands. It couldn't be. It was Jake, older, harder, with a cruel glint in his eyes, but unmistakably Jake. The man she had loved, the man she had mourned, was standing before her, leading a gang of outlaws against her town. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, and Clara felt a wave of disbelief, betrayal, and a pain so sharp it took her breath away. Her past had come back to destroy her present. Time seemed to stop. Clara stood frozen on the rooftop, the image of Jake's face seared into her mind. He was alive, but he was also the enemy, the leader of the rattlers. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over her, disbelief, anger, confusion, and a lingering flicker of something she thought she had buried long ago. Below, the townspeople were preparing for battle, unaware of Clara's paralysis. Deputy Johnson yelled, "Sheriff, what are your orders?" Clara couldn't answer, her mind was racing. How could Jake have survived the war? Why had he become an outlaw? What did he want? Was this all a terrible dream? She stumbled back, clutching the edge of the roof for support. The weight of her responsibility, the safety of Redemption Gulch, collided with the shock of Jake's reappearance. She felt torn in two, her loyalties divided. Jake raised his voice, his words echoing through the town. "Clara, come down, we don't want to hurt anyone. Just hand over the town and no one gets killed." His words snapped Clara back to reality. He was giving her a choice, betray her town or face the consequences. She knew what she had to do, but the thought of facing Jake, of confronting the man she once loved, filled her with a dread she had never known before. The battle for Redemption Gulch had just become a battle for Clara's soul. Clara finally found her voice, though it trembled. "Jake, what have you done?" Images flooded her mind. Jake teaching her how to fish in the creek, their first awkward kiss under the old oak tree, their dreams of building a life together. Could that loving, innocent boy have become this ruthless outlaw? She remembered the day he left for war, promising to return. She remembered the telegram, the crushing grief, the long, lonely nights. Now he was back, but a stranger. She gripped the wooden bird in her pocket, the one she had found at the stagecoach robbery. Jake had carved it for her when they were children. He used to say it represented their freedom, their ability to fly away from their troubles. Now it felt like a symbol of betrayal. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. She wanted to run to him, to embrace him, to ask him why, but she couldn't. She was the sheriff, and he was threatening her town. Deputy Johnson, his face pale but determined, grabbed her arm. "Sheriff, we need you. Tell us what to do." Clara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The memories, the love, the confusion, she had to push them aside. Redemption Gulch needed her. She had a duty to protect these people, even if it meant facing the man she once loved. She opened her eyes, her gaze hardening. The sheriff was back. Clara addressed the townspeople, gathered in the church for safety. Their faces were etched with fear and uncertainty. "They're here," she said, her voice strong despite the turmoil within. "The rattlers are surrounding us." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Mr. Abernathy spoke up, his voice trembling. "Sheriff, what are we going to do? We can't fight them." Clara met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "We can and we will. We've prepared for this. We'll defend our homes, our families, our town." She outlined the defense plan, assigning positions, reminding them of their training. She spoke of courage, of unity, of the importance of standing together. She omitted one crucial detail, that the leader of the Rattlers was her husband, Jake. She couldn't bring herself to reveal the truth. It would only cause more panic, more confusion. Besides, she needed time to figure things out, to decide what to do. "I know you're scared," she said, her voice softening. "But I promise you I will do everything in my power to protect you. I won't let them hurt you." The townspeople looked at her, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and hope. They trusted Clara, they believed in her, and she in turn would do everything to live up to their faith, even if it meant betraying the man she once loved. The weight of her secret and the impending battle settled heavily on her shoulders. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across Redemption Gulch. The Rattlers tightened their grip, their presence a constant, suffocating threat. Clara moved through the town like a ghost, checking barricades, reassuring nervous townsfolk, and making sure everyone was in position. She made difficult choices. She ordered the women and children to stay in the church, the strongest building in town. She positioned the best shots at key locations, knowing they might have to take lives. She rationed the food and water, preparing for a long siege. Tension hung heavy in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Every creak of a floorboard, every rustle of leaves, sent shivers down their spines. The silence was broken only by the occasional snort of a horse or the distant howl of a coyote. Clara knew the Rattlers were waiting, testing their resolve, trying to break their spirit. But she wouldn't let them. She would stand strong for herself, for her town, for the memory of the man she thought she knew. She climbed to the top of the saloon again, her rifle in hand. She looked out at the surrounding darkness, at the flickering campfires of the Rattlers. She knew Jake was out there, watching, waiting. And she knew, with a growing sense of dread, that the night was far from over. The real battle was about to begin. A soft knock on the back door of the saloon startled Clara. She grabbed her rifle, her heart pounding. "Who is it?" she called out. "It's me, Clara, it's Jake." Clara hesitated, then cautiously opened the door. Jake stood there, his face shadowed, his eyes pleading. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low. She led him inside into the dimly lit saloon. "What do you want, Jake?" she asked, her voice hard. He stepped closer, reaching out to touch her. "Clara, please, you don't understand. I didn't want this." He began to explain, telling a story of betrayal and hardship. He claimed he had been left for dead after the war, abandoned by his own army. He had fallen in with the wrong crowd, desperate to survive. He swore he never wanted to hurt anyone, that he only robbed from the rich to help the poor. Clara listened, her expression unreadable. She didn't know what to believe. Was he telling the truth, or was this just another lie? Come with me, Clara, he pleaded. Leave this town. We can start over just like we always planned. We can forget all of this. He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. For a moment she almost believed him, almost, but then she remembered the fear in the eyes of the townspeople, the broken promises, the lives he had disrupted. I can't, Jake, she said, her voice firm. I can't leave them. This is my home, this is my duty. Kay's face hardened. So that's it then, you're choosing them over me. Clara's voice was firm, though her heart ached. I'm choosing what's right, Jake. You can't just ride in here and threaten innocent people. It's wrong. They're not innocent, Clara. Jake stopped, his eyes filled with a strange mix of anger and sadness. You wouldn't understand. Then make me understand, Clara pleaded. Tell me why you're doing this. Tell me why you became this person. Jake shook his head. It's too late, Clara, it's all too late. He turned to leave, his shoulders slumped. I'm sorry it had to be this way, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Clara watched him go, her hand trembling on her rifle. This was the turning point. There was no going back. She had chosen her path, and now she had to follow it no matter the cost. She knew that Jake wouldn't give up easily. He would attack, and she had to be ready. She took a deep breath, steeling her resolve. The woman who had loved Jake was gone, replaced by the sheriff of Redemption Gulch, ready to defend her town with everything she had. She walked to the door, her eyes fixed on the horizon, and prepared for the dawn. The fight was coming, and she would be ready. The dawn broke with a volley of gunfire. The rattlers attacked, charging into Redemption Gulch with a ferocious roar. Clara, standing on the roof of the saloon, fired back, her aim steady and true. The townspeople fought bravely, defending their homes with courage and determination. Mr. Abernathy, despite his earlier fear, took down 2 rattlers with his old hunting rifle. Mrs. Higgins, armed with a shotgun, protected the church, keeping the women and children safe. Dust and smoke filled the air as bullets whizzed by. Clara moved swiftly, taking down rattlers, directing the town's defenses, and encouraging her people. She saw Deputy Johnson get wounded, but he kept fighting, his face grim. The rattlers were relentless, but the townspeople held their ground, their spirit unbroken. They used their knowledge of the town to their advantage, hiding behind buildings, using alleys as escape routes, and setting traps for the attackers. Clara knew they couldn't hold out forever. They were outnumbered, and the rattlers were getting closer. She had to find Jake, and she had to stop him. She jumped from the roof of the saloon, landing gracefully on the dusty street. She ran towards the center of town, dodging bullets and pushing through the chaos. She had a showdown to face and a decision to make. The fate of Redemption Gulch and her own heart hung in the balance. The final confrontation was near. Clara found Jake in the center of town, directing his men. He saw her coming, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Clara, he said, his voice strained, this doesn't have to end like this. Just let us go, and I promise we'll never come back. It's already ended, Jake, Clara replied, her voice firm. You made your choice when you decided to attack this town. Now you have to face the consequences. Consequences? What about the consequences of them leaving me for dead? He shouted, gesturing wildly at the town. They don't care about anyone but themselves. That's not true, Jake, and you know it, Clara said, stepping closer. These are good people. They deserve to be protected. Protected from what? From the truth, Jake laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Their argument escalated, their voices rising above the sounds of the battle. Old hurts, broken promises, and years of resentment poured out between them. Finally, Jake drew his gun. I don't want to do this, Clara, he said, his voice trembling, but you're not giving me a choice. Clara drew her own gun, her eyes fixed on Jake's. Neither am I, she replied. They stood facing each other, 2 figures silhouetted against the smoke-filled sky, the love they once shared now replaced by anger and betrayal. The battle for Redemption Gulch was about to come down to a final, heart-wrenching showdown. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant crackle of gunfire. Clara and Jake stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Suddenly a young boy, Billy, ran into the street, calling out for his mother. Jake hesitated, his eyes widening in alarm. He lowered his gun slightly. Clara seized the opportunity. With a swift movement, she lunged forward, knocking Jake's gun from his hand. He stumbled back, surprised. Clara pointed her own gun at him, her hand steady. "It's over, Jake," she said, her voice filled with sadness. "Don't make me do this." Jake looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and defeat. He knew he was beaten. He slowly raised his hands in surrender. "Arrest him, Sheriff," someone shouted from the crowd. Clara hesitated. Could she really arrest the man she once loved? Could she send him to prison? But then she looked at the faces of the townspeople, their eyes filled with fear and gratitude. She knew what she had to do. "Jake Miller," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You're under arrest for the crimes you have committed against the town of Redemption Gulch." As Deputy Johnson led Jake away, Clara felt a pang of grief, but she also felt a sense of peace. She had done what was right. She had protected her town. She had chosen duty over love, and in that choice she had found her true strength. The battle was over, but the scars would remain. The dust settled over Redemption Gulch. The rattlers were gone, either captured or scattered. The town was safe, but it was forever changed. Buildings were damaged, lives were lost, and the innocence of the town had been shattered. Clara stood on the roof of the saloon, looking out at the scene. The townspeople were already beginning to rebuild, their faces etched with determination. She saw Mrs. Higgins comforting a crying child, Mr. Abernathy helping to repair a damaged building, and Deputy Johnson bandaging a wounded townsman. Clara felt a deep sadness for what had happened, for the loss of life, for the betrayal of Jake. But she also felt a sense of pride in her town, in the courage and resilience of its people. She knew that Redemption Gulch would never be the same, but it would endure. It would rebuild, it would heal, and it would become stronger. Clara walked back to her office, the weight of her responsibilities heavy on her shoulders. She picked up the photograph of herself and Jake, her fingers tracing his face. She placed it back in its hiding place, knowing that she would never forget him, but also knowing that she had made the right choice. She was the sheriff of Redemption Gulch, and she would continue to protect her town, no matter the cost. She was a legend, not because she was tough as nails or deadly with a rifle, but because she was strong enough to do what was right, even when it broke her heart. And that, she knew, was a strength that would last forever.